Hey, cutie queens. I look horrible. Don't know what to do with myself here. I'm in trouble. It's alright, but it's okay. It's gonna be okay. Hello. Having trouble. Feel like I'm looking a little busted, but that's because I napped all day, so that's my own fault. But yes, just give me a second and I'm gonna make my little sign and then I'll read the book. We're gonna do chapters 6 and 7 tonight. What's up, girl gang? Yeah, but we're gonna do 6 and 7, and I honestly don't remember what happens in 6 and 7. Um, oh, the Smith musical is tonight, you guys. Very exciting. No. Let me just write this really quick, and then I will start reading. How's everyone doing today? I hope everyone had a fantastic Monday, and I hope it was the great start to a week. That looks horrible. Okay. Carly Write Better Challenge. Chapter 6 and chapter 7. Hello. How's everyone going? How's it going for everyone? Oh, I have peanut M&Ms. It is very exciting. I'm not going to eat while I read, but while I do this, I'm going to eat my peanut M&Ms. Okay, save image. And then I have to flip it. Okay, so we have the Smith musical tonight, you guys. Very exciting. And then chapter 7. I don't remember what happens there, but it feels exciting. Okay. Romancing Mr Bridgerton by Julia Quinn. A book that should be read in a British accent, but I can't do a British accent good enough for long enough to read. That's what I've learned after the first try. Sounded like a fool. Peanut M&Ms. They are schmackin'. I do love a chocolate-covered almond. I love a Kirkland chocolate-covered almond that comes in the big tub. These are the Kirkland tubs of peanut M&Ms. I love a peanut M&M. I love a Costco in any shape or form. I hoped that would help with how I feel about how my hair looks today, but it didn't. But it's okay. Accent is good. Thank you. Don't tell me that because then I'll talk in it forever. Ooh, blueberry almonds. Okay, pop off. I've never had those before. That does sound good though. I like the little acai berries, the dark chocolate covered ones. Those pop. Lord have mercy upon me. All right. Hold on. Hello, Queen. Hi, Kelsey. Okay. Hope that stays up. Oh my god, you guys! Man candle. I forget again. So, sorry. Anytime we read a book about the hot man, we have to light the hot man candle. This is a candle that I found at the farmer's market by one of my favorite candle companies now. It's called Bella VA Candles. Where's my candle wick trimmer? We're serious about this. I was walking around the farmer's market and I said, I want a candle that smells like a good smelling man. And the lady called me over and she said, boy, do I have the thing for you. Okay, I've trimmed my wick. And soon Colin's gonna wet his. Anyway, shut up, Carly. It's fine. This is oak moss and amber, and it smells divine. And we're gonna light it because we're gonna be talking about hot men, because we're reading Bridgerton, of course. And there's our hot man candle. Oak moss and amber. So if I ever write a fan fiction and Colin ever needs to be described how he smells, you're gonna smell like oak moss and amber, and you can leave me alone for it. I am horrible about describing smells. It's like, well, right now it smells like fire because it hasn't melted any of the wax yet. Yeah, oak moss and amber. That's what it's called. I don't have the brain cells. I apologize. Books and bread. I wish I did. Okay, that's my last peanut M&M. I promise I'm gonna start reading. The peanut M&Ms are so addictive. I have 4 left and I need to put them out of my line of sight. Like I'm putting them in a drawer. I need to get like a setup instead of just propping my phone up. Okay. I'm sorry for using a disposable bottle, but I don't trust the tap water. I usually fill my sippy cup, but I couldn't today. Okay. I already read this chapter. Did we read chapter 6? Oh my god. You guys, I already read chapter 6. We're reading chapter 7 and 8. Major apologies. That is my bad. Major apologies to the girl gang. We are reading chapters 7 and 8 tonight. I'll make it really quick, I promise. Wow, that was so silly of me. Silly goose moment right there. We are reading chapters 7 and 8. Okay. Honestly, I did have time for another peanut M&M, but we're not going to do that. It's fine. I'm so sorry. I'm going to start reading in a second, I promise. I don't think I can reread tonight, just based on the 2 chapters I want to get done, but I will be posting them on the YouTube channel. So if you give us a follow, it will be in the bio shortly. Honestly, if you look up Between the Scandal Sheets on YouTube, the first 2 chapters are on there. What am I doing? I can't recall. Oh, I'm flipping. Yeah, okay. She's got brain cells. They survived. Okay. Hi, Christmas Fair. Very fair. Okay. We are reading Romancing Mr. Bridgerton by Julia Quinn, chapters 7 and 8. Okay. Chapter 7. Colin Bridgerton had quite the bevy of young ladies at his side at the Smythe-Smith musicale Wednesday night, all fawning over his injured hand. This author does not know how the injury was sustained. Indeed, Mr. Bridgerton has been rather annoyingly tight-lipped about it. Speaking of annoyances, the man in question seemed rather irritated by all of the attention. Indeed, this author overheard him tell his brother Antony that he wished he'd left the unrepeatable word bandage at home. Lady Whistledown Society Papers, 16th of April, 1824. So again, it's been like 10 days since like the first interaction. Let me go back and check. They've known each other for 12 years, but it's been like 10 days. Chapter 1 was on the 2nd of April, so it's been 2 weeks exactly since Colin's been like, wait, kind of something going on. Why did she have to do this to herself? Year after year, the invitation arrived by messenger, and year after year, Penelope swore she would never, as God is her witness, ever attend another Smythe-Smith musicale. And yet, year after year, she found herself seated in the Smythe-Smith music room, desperately trying not to cringe, at least not visibly, at the latest generation of Smythe-Smith, as the latest generation of Smythe-Smith girls butchered poor Mr. Mozart in musical effigy. It was painful. Horribly, awfully, hideously painful. Truly, there was no other way to describe it. Even more perplexing was that Penelope always seemed to end up in the front row, or close to it, which was beyond excruciating, and not just on the and not just on the ears. Every few years there would be one Smythe Smith girl who seemed aware that she was taking part in what could only be jeez. Every few years there would be one Smythe Smith girl who seemed aware that she was taking part in what could only be termed as a crime against auditory law. While other girls attacked their violins and pianofortes with oblivious vigor, this one seemed. You guys, I'm so sorry. I can't read. I really do think I need glasses. Even more perplexing was that Penelope always seemed to end up in the front row, or close to it, which was beyond excruciating, and not just on the ears. Every few years there would be one Smythe Smith girl who seemed aware that she was taking part in what could only be termed as a crime against auditory law. While the other girls attacked their violins and pianofortes with oblivious vigor, this odd one out played with a pained expression on her face, an expression Penelope knew well. It was the face one put on when one wanted to be anywhere but where one was. You could try to hide it, but it always came out in the corners of the mouth, which were held tight and taut. In the eyes, of course, which floated either above or below everyone's line of vision. Heaven knew Penelope's face had been cursed with that same expression many a time. Maybe that was why she never managed to stay home on a Smythe Smith night. Someone had to smile encouragingly and pretend to enjoy the music. Besides, it wasn't as if she were forced to come and listen more than once per year anyway. Still, one couldn't help but think that there must be a fortune to be made in discreet earplugs. The quartet of girls were warming up, a jumble of discordant notes and scales that only promised to worsen once they began to play in earnest. Penelope had taken a seat in the center of the second row, much to her sister Felicity's dismay. There are two perfectly good seats in the back corner, Felicity hissed in her ear. It's too late now, Penelope returned, settling down on the lightly cushioned chair. God help me, Felicity groaned. Penelope picked up her program and began leafing through it. If we don't sit here, someone else will, she said. Precisely my desire! Penelope leaned in so that only her sister could hear her murmured words. We can be counted on to smile and be polite. Imagine if someone like Cressida Twombly sat here and snickered all the way through. Felicity looked around. I don't think Cressida Twombly would be caught dead here. Penelope chose to ignore the... Who is texting me? Oh. Hi, Brianna. Penelope leaned in so that only her sister could hear her murmured words. We can be counted on to smile and be polite. Imagine if someone like Cressida Twombly sat here and snickered all the way through. Felicity looked around. I don't think Cressida Twombly would be caught dead here. Penelope chose to ignore the statement. The last thing they need is someone seated right in the front who likes to make unkind remarks. Those poor girls would be mortified. I'm sorry, I'm going to turn on my do not disturb. Brianna, knock it off. Okay, I'm so sorry. Those poor girls would be mortified. They're going to be mortified anyway, Felicity grumbled. No, they won't, Penelope said. At least not that one, or that one, or that one, she said, pointing out the two on violins and the one on piano. But that one, she motioned discreetly to the girl sitting with a cello between her knees, is already miserable. The least we can do is not make it worse by allowing someone catty and cruel to sit here. She's only going to be eviscerated later this week by Lady Whistledown, Felicity muttered. Penelope opened her mouth to say more, but at that exact moment she realized that the person who had just occupied the seat on her other side was Eloise. Eloise, Penelope said with obvious delight. I thought you were planning to stay home. Eloise grimaced, her skin taking on a decidedly green pallor. I can't explain it, but I can't seem to stay away. It's rather like a carriage accident. You just can't not look. Or listen, Felicity said, as the case may be. Penelope smiled. She couldn't help it. Did I hear you talking about Lady Whistledown when I arrived? Eloise asked. I told Penelope, Felicity said, leaning rather inelegantly across her sister to speak to Eloise, that they're going to be destroyed by Lady W after this week. I don't know, Eloise said thoughtfully. She doesn't pick on the Smythe-Smith girls every year. I'm not sure why. I know why, cackled a voice from behind. Eloise, Penelope, and Felicity all twisted in their seats, then lurched backwards as Lady Danbury's came perilously close to their face. Lady Danbury, Penelope gulped, unable to resist the urge to touch her nose, if only to reassure herself that it was still there. I have that Lady Whistledown figured out, Lady Danbury said. You do? Felicity asked. She has a soft heart, the old lady continued. You can see that one. She poked her cane in the direction of the cellist, nearly piercing Eloise's ear in the process. Right over there? Yes, Eloise said, rubbing her ear, although I don't think I'm going to be able to hear her. Probably a blessing, Lady Danbury said, before turning back to the subject at hand. You can thank me later. You were saying something about the cellist? Penelope said swiftly, before Eloise said something entirely inappropriate. Of course I was. Look at her, Lady Danbury said. She's miserable. And, well, she should be. She's clearly the only one who has a clue as to how dreadful they are. The other three don't have a musical sense of a gnat. Penelope gave her younger sister a rather smug glance. Mark my words, Lady Danbury said. Lady Whistledown won't have a thing to say about this musicale. She won't want to hurt that one's feelings. The rest of them. Felicity, Penelope, and Eloise all ducked as the cane came swinging by. Bah, she couldn't care less about the rest of them. It's an interesting theory, Penelope said. Lady Danbury sat back contentedly in her chair. Yes, it is, isn't it? Penelope nodded. I think you're right. I usually am. Still twisted in her seat, Penelope turned firstly to Felicity, then to Eloise, then said, It's the same reason why I keep coming to these infernal musicals year after year. To see Lady Danbury? Eloise asked, blinking with confusion. No, because of girls like her, Penelope pointed at the cellist. Because I know exactly how she feels. Don't be silly, Penelope, Felicity said. You've never played piano in public, and even if you did, you're quite accomplished. Penelope turned to her sister. It's not about the music, Felicity. Then the oddest thing happened to Lady Danbury. Her face changed. Completely, utterly, astoundingly changed. Her eyes grew misty, wistful, and her lips, which were usually slightly pinched and sarcastic at the corners, softened. I was that girl too, Miss Featherington, she said, so quietly that both Eloise and Felicity were forced to lean forward. Eloise with a, I beg your pardon? And Felicity with a considerably less polite, what? But Lady Danbury only had eyes for Penelope. It's why I attend year after year, the older lady said, just like you. For a moment Penelope felt the oddest sense of connection to the older woman, which was mad because they had nothing in common aside from gender. Not age, not status, nothing. And yet it was almost as if the Countess had somehow chosen her. For what purpose, Penelope could never guess, but she seemed determined to light a fire under Penelope's well-ordered and often boring life. And Penelope couldn't help but think that it was somehow working. Isn't it nice to discover that we're not exactly what we thought we were? Lady Danbury's words from the other night still echoed in Penelope's head, almost like a litany, almost like a dare. Do you know what I think, Miss Featherington? Lady Danbury asked, her tone deceptively mild. I couldn't possibly begin to guess, Penelope said, with great honesty and respect in her voice. I think you could be Lady Whistledown. Felicity and Eloise gasped. Penelope's lips parted with surprise. No one had even thought to accuse her of such before. It was unbelievable, unthinkable, and rather flattering, actually. Penelope felt her mouth sliding into a sly smile. Then she leaned forward as if getting ready to impart news of great import. Lady Danbury leaned forward. Felicity and Eloise leaned forward. Do you know what I think, Lady Danbury? Penelope asked in a compellingly soft voice. Well, Lady D said with a wicked gleam in her eye, I would tell you that I am breathless with anticipation, but you've already told me once before that you think I am Lady Whistledown. Are you? Lady Danbury smiled archly. Maybe I am. Felicity and Eloise gasped again, louder this time. Penelope's stomach lurched. Are you admitting it? Eloise whispered. Of course I'm not admitting it, Lady Danbury barked, straightening her spine and thumping her cane against the floor with enough force to momentarily stop the four amateur musicians in their warm-up. Even if it were true, and I'm not saying whether or not it is, would I be fool enough to admit it? Then why did you say, because, you ninnyhead, I'm trying to make a point? She then proceeded to fall silent until Penelope was forced to ask, which is? Lady Danbury gave them all an extremely exasperated look. That anyone could be Lady Whistledown, she exclaimed, thumping her cane on the floor with renewed vigor. Anyone at all. Well, except me, Felicity put in. I'm quite certain it's not me. Lady Danbury didn't even honor Felicity with a glance. Let me tell you something, she said. As if we could stop you, Penelope said, so sweetly that it came out like a compliment. And truth be told, it was a compliment. She admired Lady Danbury a great deal. She admired anyone who knew how to speak her mind in public. Lady Danbury chuckled. There is more to you than meets the eye, Penelope Featherington. That's true, Felicity said with a grin. She can be rather cruel. For example, nobody would believe it, but when we were young, Penelope elbowed her in the ribs. See? Felicity said. What I was going to say, Lady Danbury continued, was that the Ton is going about my challenge all wrong. How do you suggest we go about it, then? Eloise asked. Lady Danbury waved her hand dismissively in Eloise's face. I have to explain what people are doing wrong first, she said. They keep looking towards the obvious people. People like your mother, she said, turning to Penelope and Felicity. Mother? They both echoed. Oh, please, Lady Danbury scoffed. A bigger busybody this town has never seen. She's exactly the sort of person everyone suspects. Penelope had no idea what to say to that. Her mother was a notorious gossip. But it was difficult to imagine her as Lady Whistledown. Which is why, Lady Danbury continued, a shrewd look in her eye, it can't be her. Well, that, Penelope said with a touch of sarcasm, and the fact that Felicity and I could tell you for certain that it's not her. Pish! If your mother were Lady Whistledown, she'd have figured out a way to keep it from you. My mother, Felicity said doubtfully. I don't think so. What I'm trying to say, Lady Danbury ground out, prior to all of these infernal interruptions, Penelope thought she heard Eloise snort, was that if Lady Whistledown were someone obvious, she'd have been found out by now, don't you think? Silence, silence, until it became clear some response was required. Then all three of them nodded with appropriate thoughtfulness. Lord. Silence, until it became clear some response was required. Then all three of them nodded with appropriate thoughtfulness and vigor. She must be someone that nobody suspects, Lady Danbury said. She has to be. Penelope found herself nodding again. Lady Danbury did make sense, in a strange sort of way. Which is why, the older lady continued triumphantly, I am not a likely candidate. Penelope blinked, not quite following the logic. I beg your pardon? Oh, please, Lady Danbury said. Lady Danbury gave Penelope quite the most disdainful glance. Do you think you're the first person to suspect me? Penelope just shook her head. I still think it's you. That earned her a measure of respect. Lady Danbury nodded approvingly as she said, You're cheekier than you look. Felicity leaned forward and said in a rather conspiratorial voice, It's true. Penelope swatted her sister's hand. Felicity! I think the musical is starting, Eloise said. Heaven help us all, Lady Danbury announced. I don't know why Mr. Bridgerton! Penelope had turned to face the small stage area, but she whipped back around to see Colin making his way along the row of empty seats beside Lady Danbury, apologizing good-naturedly as he bumped into people's knees. His apologies, of course, were accompanied by one of his lethal smiles, and no fewer than 3 ladies positively melted in their seats as a result. Melted? Okay. Penelope frowned. It was disgusting. Penelope, Felicity whispered, did you just growl? Colin, Eloise said, I didn't know you were coming. Changed my mind at the last moment. I've always been a great lover of music, after all. Which would explain your presence here, Eloise said in an exceptionally dry voice. Colin acknowledged her statement with nothing more than an arch of his brow before turning to Penelope and saying, Good evening, Miss Featherington. He nodded to Felicity with another, Miss Featherington. It took Penelope a moment to find her voice. They had parted most awkwardly that afternoon, and now here he was with a friendly smile. Good evening, Mr. Bridgerton, she finally managed. Does anyone know what's on the program tonight? That's not how you say words. Does anyone know what's on the program tonight? He asked, looking terribly interested. Penelope had to admire that. Colin had a way of looking at you as if nothing in the world could be more interesting than your next sentence. It was a talent, that, especially now when they all knew he couldn't possibly care one way or another what the Smythe-Smith girls chose to play that evening. I believe it's Mozart, Felicity said. They almost always choose Mozart. Lovely, Colin replied, leaning back in his chair as if he'd just finished an excellent meal. I'm a great fan of Mr. Mozart. In that case, Lady Danbury cackled, elbowing him in the ribs, you might want to make your escape before the possibility still exists. While the possibility still exists. Don't be silly, he said. I'm sure the girls will do their best. Oh, there's no question of them doing their best, Eloise said ominously. Shh, Penelope said. I think they're ready to begin. Not, she admitted to herself, that she was exceptionally eager to listen to the Smythe-Smith version of Ein klein not Musik. She felt profoundly ill at ease with Colin. She wasn't sure what to say to him, except that whatever it was she should say definitely shouldn't be in front of Eloise, Felicity, and most of all, Lady Danbury. A butler came around and snuffed out a few candles to signal that the girls were ready to begin. Penelope braced herself, swallowed in such a way as to clog her inner ear canals. It didn't work. And then the torture began. And it went on and on and on. Penelope wasn't certain what was more agonizing, the music or the knowledge that Colin was sitting right behind her. The back of her neck prickled with an awareness, and she found herself fidgeting like mad, her fingers tapping relentlessly on the dark blue velvet of her skirts. When the Smythe-Smith quartet was finally done, three of the girls were beaming at the polite applause, and the fourth, the cellist, looks as if she wanted to crawl under a rock. Penelope sighed. At least she, in all of her unsuccessful seasons, hadn't ever been forced to parade her deficiencies before all the ton like these girls had. She'd always been allowed to melt into the shadows, to hover quietly at the perimeter of the room, watching the other girls take their turns on the dance floor. Oh, her mother dragged her here and there, trying to place her in the path of some eligible gentleman or another. But that was nothing like what the Smythe-Smith girls were forced to endure. Although, in all honesty, 3 out of the 4 seemed blissfully unaware of their musical ineptitude. Penelope smiled and clapped. She certainly wasn't going to burst their collective bubble. And if Lady Danbury's theory was correct, Lady Whistledown wasn't going to write a word about the musical. The applause petered out rather quickly, and soon everyone was milling about, making polite conversation with their neighbors, and eyeing the sparsely laid refreshment table at the back of the room. Lemonade, Penelope murmured to herself. Perfect. She was dreadfully hot, really. Really, what had she been thinking wearing velvet on such a warm night? And a cool beverage would be just the thing to make her feel better. Not to mention that Colin was trapped in conversation with Lady Danbury, so it was the ideal time to make her escape. But as soon as Penelope had her glass in hand, she heard Colin's achingly familiar voice behind her, murmuring her name. She turned around, and before she had any idea what she was doing, she said, I'm sorry. You are. Yes, she assured him. At least I think I am. His eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. The conversation grows more intriguing by the second. Colin, he held out his arm. Take a turn with me around the room, will you? I don't think. He moved his arm closer to her, just by an inch or so, but the message was clear. Please, he said. She nodded and set her lemonade down. Very well. They walked in silence for almost a minute. Then Colin said, I would like to apologize to you. I was the one who stormed out of the room, Penelope pointed out. He tilted his head slightly, and she could see an indulgent smile playing across his lips. I'd hardly call it storming, he said. Penelope frowned. She probably shouldn't have left in such a huff, but now that she had, she was oddly proud of it. It wasn't every day that a woman such as herself got to make such a dramatic exit. Well, I shouldn't have been so rude, muttered, by now not really meaning it. He arched a brow, then obviously decided not to pursue the matter. I would like to apologize, he said, for being such a whiny little brat. Penelope actually tripped over her feet. He helped her regain her balance and said, I am aware I have many, many things in my life for which I should be grateful. For which I am grateful, he corrected, his mouth not quite smiling, but certainly sheepish. It was unforgivably rude to complain to you. No, she said. I have spent all evening thinking about what you said, and She swallowed, then licked her lips, which had gone quite dry. She spent all day trying to think of the right words, and she thought that she'd found them. But now that he was here at her side, she couldn't think of a deuced thing. Do you need another glass of lemonade? Colin asked politely. She shook her head. You have every right to your feelings, she blurted out. They may not be what I would feel if I were in your shoes, but you have every right to them. But she broke off, and Colin found himself rather desperate to know what she planned to say. But what, Penelope? He urged. It's nothing. It's not nothing to me. His hand was on her arm, and so he squeezed slightly to let her know that he meant what he said. For the longest time he didn't think she was actually going to respond. And then, just as he thought his face would crack from the smile he held so carefully on his lips, they were in public after all, and it wouldn't do to invite comment and speculation by appearing urgent and disturbed, she sighed. It was a lovely sound, strangely comforting, soft, and wise. It made him want to look at her more closely, to see into her mind, to hear the rhythms of her soul. Colin, Penelope said quietly, if you feel frustrated by your current situation, you should do something to change it. It's really that simple. That's what I do, he said with a careless shrug of his outside shoulder. My mother accuses me of picking up and leaving the country completely on a whim, but the truth is, you do it when you're feeling frustrated, she finished for him. He nodded. She understood him. He wasn't sure how it had happened, or even that it made any sense, but Penelope Featherington understood him. I think you should publish your journals, she said. I couldn't. Why not? He stopped in his tracks, letting go of her arm. He didn't really have an answer, other than the odd pounding in his heart. Who would want to read them? He finally asked. I would, she said frankly. Eloise, Felicity, and she added, ticking off names on her fingers. Your mother, Lady Whistledown, I'm sure, she added with a mischievous smile. She does write about you rather a lot. Her good humor was infectious, and Colin couldn't quite suppress his smile. Penelope, it doesn't count if the only people who buy the book are people I know. Why not? Her lips twitched. You know a lot of people. Why, if you only count Bridgertons. He grabbed her hand. He didn't know why, but he grabbed her hand. Penelope, stop. She just laughed. I think Eloise told me that you have piles and piles of cousins as well, and enough, he warned, but he was grinning as he said it. Penelope stared down at her hand in his and said, Lots of people will want to read about your travels. Maybe at first it'll only be because you're a well-known figure in London, but it won't take long before everyone realizes what a good writer you are, and they'll be clamoring for more. I don't want to be a success because of the Bridgerton name, he said. She dropped his hand and planted hers on her hips. Are you even listening to me? I just told you that. What are you two talking about? Eloise, looking very, very curious. Nothing, they both muttered at the same time. Eloise snorted. Don't insult me. It's not nothing. Penelope looked as if she might start breathing fire at any moment. Your brother's just being obtuse, Penelope said. Well, that's nothing new, Eloise said. Wait a moment, Colin explained. But that, Eloise probed, ignoring him entirely. Oh, but what, Eloise probed, ignoring him entirely, is he being obtuse about? It's a private matter, Colin ground out. Which makes it all the more interesting, Eloise said. She looked at Penelope expectantly. I'm sorry, Penelope said. I really can't say. I can't believe it, Eloise cried out. You're not going to tell me. No, Penelope replied, feeling oddly satisfied with herself. I'm not. I can't believe it, Eloise said again, turning to her brother. I can't believe it. His lips quirked to the barest of smiles. Believe it. You're keeping secrets from me. He raised his brow. Did you think I told you everything? Of course not, she scowled. But I thought Penelope did. But this isn't my secret to tell, Penelope said. It's Colin's. I think the planet has shifted on its axis, Eloise grumbled. Or perhaps England has crashed into France. All I know is this is not the same world I inhabited just this morning. Penelope couldn't help it. She giggled. And you're laughing at me, Eloise added. No, I'm not, Penelope said, laughing. Really, I'm not. Do you know what you need? Colin asked. Me? Eloise queried. He nodded. A husband. You're as bad as mother. I could be a lot worse if I really put my mind to it. Of that, I have no doubt, Eloise shot back. Stop, stop, Penelope said, truly laughing in earnest now. They both looked at her expectantly, as if to say, now what? I'm so glad I came tonight, Penelope said, the words tumbling unbidden from her lips. I can't remember a nicer evening. Truly, I can't. Several hours later, as Colin was laying in bed, staring up at the ceiling in the bedroom of his new flat in Bloomsbury, it occurred to him that he felt the exact same way. He's catching his feels. You guys, what are we talking about in the chat? I see that some people whom I know are causing havoc in the chat. I don't know if they're still here, but if they are, I turned my phone on Do Not Disturb. Yeah, he didn't know why. Colin, I'll tell you why, baby. You got feelings. It's okay. Yeah. So he went to the Spike Smith musical just to talk to her. I'm gonna eat my last 4 peanut M&Ms, and no one can say anything to me. He went to the Spike Smith musical to talk to her. They had banter. They had purpose talk again. What just a cutie pie chapter. I wonder what's gonna happen next. And we'll find out after I eat my peanut M&Ms. Just give me a second. Yeah, it's dolce, yes. It's yas peanut. It's really the little moments between them. I mean, we can believe that there's been little moments between them before, at least in Penelope's mind, because they've known each other for 12 years. But it's been literally 2 weeks, and he's noticed her that he really desperately wants to know what she has to say next, which is exciting. Because that's never really happened to her before. Like, people don't really care what Penelope Featherington has to say, you know? But suddenly, he does. And he's always made her feel that way, but now he really, truly, actually cares, which is exciting. What if I choke to death on this TikTok live on a peanut M&M? That'd be so embarrassing. Would you not be embarrassed? Imagine Rose having to call 911. Be like, she's choking. She's choking on a peanut. Mm-hmm. Yeah, RIP to me. Okay. Chapter 8. What happens in Chapter 8? I do wish I knew off the top of my head. Oh, I think we might have to read Chapter 9 too. I just flipped through. I don't know, it's Chapter 9. What time is it? It's already 9:40. Oh my god, Chapter 9 is long! Well, we know why Chapter 9 is long. Chapter 9 is long. It's like 30 pages. I'll read Chapter 8 and then we can decide, right? Okay. Hold on. Let me get the last vestiges of peanut M&M out of my throat. And I also need to be hydrated for upcoming chapters. Keep that in mind. Okay. Colin Bridgerton and Penelope Jesus Christ. Chapter 8. Colin Bridgerton and Penelope Featherington were seen in conversation at the Smythe-Smith musicale, although no one seems to know what exactly they were discussing. This author would venture to guess that their conversation centered upon this author's identity, since that was what everyone else seemed to be talking about before, after, and rather rudely in this author's esteemed opinion, during the performance. In other news, Honoria Smythe-Smith's violin was damaged when Lady Danbury accidentally knocked it off a table while waving her cane. Lady Danbury insisted upon replacing the instrument, but then declared that as it was not her habit to buy anything but the best, Honoria will have a Ruggeri violin, imported from Cremona, Italy. It is this author's understanding that when one factors in manufacture and shipping time, along with a lengthy waiting list, it takes 6 months for a Ruggieri violin to reach our shores. Lady Whistledown Society Papers, 16th of April, 1824. There are moments in a woman's life when her heart flips in her chest, when the world suddenly seems uncommonly pink and perfect, when a symphony can be heard in the tinkle of a doorbell. Penelope Featherington had just such a moment 2 days after the Smythe-Smith musicale. All it took was a knock on her bedroom door, followed by her butler's voice informing her, "Mr. Colin Bridgerton is here to see you." Penelope tumbled right off the bed. Brierly, who had butlered for the Featherington family long enough so that he did not even so much as bat an eyelash at Penelope's clumsiness, murmured, "Shall I tell him you are not in?" "No!" Penelope nearly shrieked, stumbling to her feet. "I mean, no," she added in a more reasonable voice. "But I will require 10 minutes to prepare myself." She glanced in the mirror, winced at her disheveled appearance. 15. "As you wish, Miss Penelope." "Oh, and make sure to prepare a tray of food. Mr. Bridgerton is sure to be hungry. He's always hungry. He's a hungry boy." The butler nodded again. Penelope stood stock still as Brierly disappeared out the door, then, completely unable to contain herself, danced from foot to foot, emitting a strange squealing sort of noise, one that she was convinced, or at least hoped, had never before crossed her lips. Then again, she couldn't remember the last time a gentleman had called upon her, much less the one with whom she'd been desperately in love for almost half her life. "Settle down," she said, spreading her fingers and pressing her flattened palms out in much the same motion she might make if she were trying to placate a small, unruly crowd. "You must remain calm. Calm," she repeated, as if that would actually do the trick. Calm. But inside her heart was dancing. She took a few deep breaths, walked over to her dressing table, and picked up her hairbrush. It would only take a few minutes to repin her hair. Surely Colin wasn't going to flee if she kept him waiting a short while. He'd expect her to take a bit of time to ready herself, wouldn't he? But still she found herself fixing her hair in record time, and by the time she stepped through the sitting room door, a mere 5 minutes had passed since the butler's announcement. That was quick, Colin said with a quirky grin. He'd been standing by the window, peering out at Mount Street. Oh, was it? Penelope said, hoping that the heat she felt on her skin wasn't translating into a blush. A woman was supposed to keep a gentleman waiting, although not too long. Still, it made no sense to hold to such silly behavior with Colin, of all people. He would never be interested in her in romantic fashion, and besides, they were friends. Friends. It seemed like such an odd concept, and yet that was exactly what they were. They'd always been friendly acquaintances, but since his return from Cyprus, they'd become friends in truth. It was magical. Even if he never loved her, and she'd rather thought he never would. This was better than what they'd had before. To what do I owe the pleasure? She asked, taking a seat on her mother's slightly faded yellow damask sofa. Colin sat across from her in a rather uncomfortable straight-backed chair. He leaned forward, resting his hands on his knees, and Penelope knew instantly that something was wrong. It simply wasn't the pose a gentleman adopted for a regular social call. He looked too distraught, too intense. It's rather serious, he said, his face grim. Penelope nearly rose to her feet. Has something happened? Is someone ill? No, nothing like that. He paused, let out a long breath, then raked his hand through his already mussed-up hair. It's about Eloise. What is? I don't know how to say this. Do you have anything to eat? Penelope was ready to wring his neck. For heaven's sake, Colin! Sorry, he muttered. I haven't eaten all day. A first, I'm sure, Penelope said impatiently. I already told Brierly to fix a tray. Now, will you just tell me what is wrong? Or do you plan to wait until I expire of impatience? I think she's Lady Whistledown, he blurted out. Penelope's mouth fell open. He wasn't sure that what she'd expected him to say, but it wasn't this. Penelope, did you hear me? Eloise, she asked, even though she knew exactly who he was talking about. He nodded. She can't be. He stood and began to pace, too full of nervous energy to sit still. Why not? Because, because, because why? Because there's no way she could have done that for 10 years there's no way she could have done that for 10 years without my knowing. His expression went from disturbed to distaste. I would love to be able to read. His expression went from disturbed to disdainful in an instant. I hardly think you're privy to everything that Eloise does. Of course not, Penelope replied, giving him a rather irritated look. But I can tell you with absolute certainty that there's no way Eloise could keep a secret of that magnitude from me for over 10 years. She's simply not capable of it. Penelope, she's the nosiest person I know. Well, that much is true, Penelope agreed, except for my mother, I suppose, but that's hardly enough to convict her. Colin stopped his pacing and planted his hands on his hips. She's always writing things down. Why would you think that? He held up his hand, rubbing his thumb briskly against his fingertips. Ink stains. Constantly. Lots of people use pen and ink. Penelope motioned broadly at Colin. You write in journals. I'm certain you've had your share of ink on your fingers. Yes, but I don't disappear when I write in my journals. Penelope felt her pulse quicken. What do you mean? She asked, her voice growing breathless. I mean that she locks herself in her room for hours on end, and it's after those periods that her fingers are covered with ink. Penelope didn't say anything for an agonizingly long moment. Colin's evidence was damning indeed, especially when combined with Eloise's well-known and well-documented penchant for nosiness. But she wasn't Lady Whistledown. She couldn't be. Penelope would bet her life on it. Finally, Penelope just crossed her arms and, in a tone of voice that probably would have been more at home on an exceedingly stubborn 6-year-old, she said, It's not her. It's not. Colin sat back down and looked defeated. I wish I could share your certainty. Colin, you need to... Where the hell is the food? He grumbled. She should have been shocked, but somehow his lack of manners amused her. I'm sure Brierly will be here shortly. He sprawled into a chair. I'm hungry. Yes, Penelope said, her lips twitching. I surmised as much. He sighed, wearied and worried. If she's Lady Whistledown, it'll be a disaster. A pure, unmitigated disaster. It wouldn't be that bad, Penelope said carefully. Not that I think she's Lady Whistledown, because I don't. But truly, if she were, would it be so dreadful? I'd rather like Lady Whistledown myself. Yes, Penelope, Colin said rather sharply. It would be so dreadful. She'd be ruined. I don't think she'd be ruined. Of course she'd be ruined. Do you have any idea how many people that woman has insulted over the years? I didn't realize you hated Lady Whistledown so much, Penelope said. I don't hate her, Colin said impatiently. It doesn't matter if I hate her. Everyone else hates her. I don't think that's true. They all buy her paper. Of course they buy her paper. Everyone buys her bloody paper. Colin! Sorry, he muttered, but it didn't really sound like he meant it. Penelope nodded her acceptance to his apology. Whoever that Lady Whistledown is, Colin said, shaking his finger at her with much vehemence that she actually lurched backwards. When she is unmasked, she will not be able to show her face in London. Penelope delicately cleared her throat. I didn't realize you cared so much about the opinions of society. I don't, he retorted. Well, not much at least. Anyone who tells you they don't care at all is a liar and a hypocrite. Penelope rather thought he was correct, but she was surprised he'd admitted it. It seemed only men always liked to pretend that they were wholly self-contained, completely unaffected by the whims and opinions of society. Colin leaned forward, his green eyes burning with intensity. This isn't about me, Penelope. It's about Eloise, and if she is cast out of society, she will be crushed. He sat back, his entire body radiated tension. Not to mention what it would do to my mother. Penelope let out a long breath. I really think you're getting upset over nothing, she said. I hope you're right, he replied, closing his eyes. He wasn't sure when he'd started to suspect his sister might be Lady Whistledown. Probably after Lady Danbury had issued her now famous challenge. Unlike most of London, Colin had never been terribly interested in Lady Whistledown's true identity. The column was entertaining, and he certainly read it along with everyone else. But to his mind, Lady Whistledown was simply Lady Whistledown, and that was all she needed to be. But Lady Danbury's dare had started him thinking, and like the rest of the Bridgertons, once he got the hold of an idea, he was fundamentally incapable of letting it go. Somehow, it had occurred to him that Eloise had the perfect temperament and skill to write such a column. And then, before he could convince himself that that was crazy, he'd seen the ink spots on her fingers. Since then, he'd gone nearly mad, unable to think about anything but the possibility that Eloise had a secret life. He didn't know which irritated him more, that Eloise might be Lady Whistledown, or that she had managed to hide it from him for over a decade. How galling to be hoodwinked by one's sister. He liked to think himself smarter than that. But he needed to focus on the present, because if his suspicions were correct, how on earth were they going to deal with the scandal when she was discovered? And she would be discovered. With all of London's lusting after the £1,000 prize, Lady Whistledown didn't stand a chance. Colin! Colin! He opened his eyes, wondering how long Penelope had been calling his name. I really think you should stop worrying about Eloise, she said. There are hundreds and hundreds of people in London. Lady Whistledown could be any one of them. Heavens, with your eye for detail, she waggled her fingers to remind him of Eloise's ink-stained fingertips. You could be Lady Whistledown. He shot her a rather condescending look. Except for the small detail of my having been out of the country half the time. Penelope chose to ignore his sarcasm. You're certainly a good enough writer to carry it off. Colin had intended to say something droll and slightly gruff, dismissing her rather weak arguments, but the truth was he was so secretly delighted about her good writer compliment that all he could do was sit there with a lopey smile on his face. Are you all right? Penelope asked. Perfectly fine, he replied, snapping to attention and trying to adopt a more sober mien. Why do you ask? Because you suddenly looked quite ill. Dizzy, actually. I'm fine, he repeated, probably a little louder than was necessary. I'm just thinking about the scandal. She let out a beleaguered sigh, which irritated him, because he didn't see that she had any reason to feel so impatient with him. What scandal? She asked. The scandal that is going to erupt when she is discovered, he ground out. She is not Lady Whistledown, she insisted. Colin suddenly sat up straight, his eyes alight with a new idea. Do you know, he said in a rather intense sort of voice, but I don't think it matters if she's Lady Whistledown or not. Penelope stared at him blankly for a full 3 seconds before looking about the room, muttering, Where's the food? I must be lightheaded. Haven't you spent the last 10 minutes positively going mad over the possibility that she is? As if on cue, Brierly entered the room with a heavily laden tray. Penelope and Colin watched in silence as the butler laid out the meal. Would you like me to fix your plates? He inquired. No, that's quite all right, Penelope said quickly. We can manage for ourselves. Brierly nodded, and as soon as he laid the flatware and filled the 2 glasses with lemonade, he left the room. Listen to me, Colin said, jumping to his feet and moving to the door so that it almost rested against the doorframe, but remained technically open should anyone quibble about proprieties. It's very out of character for show, Colin. Don't you want something to eat? Penelope inquired, holding aloft a plate that she'd filled with various small snacks. He snatched a piece of cheese, ate it in 2 rather indelicate bites, and continued. Even if Eloise isn't Lady Whistledown, and mind you, I still think she is, it doesn't matter, because if I suspect that she's Lady Whistledown, then surely someone else will as well. Your point being? Colin realized that his arms were reached forward, and he stopped himself before he reached out to shake her shoulders. It doesn't matter, don't you see? If someone points his finger at her, she'll be ruined. But not, Penelope said, appearing to require a great deal of effort to unclench her teeth, if she's not Lady Whistledown. How could she prove it? Colin returned, jumping to his feet. Once a rumor is started, the damage is done. It develops a life of its own. Colin, you ceased to make sense 5 minutes ago. No, hear me out. He whirled to face her. He whirled to face her, and he was seized by a feeling of such intensity that he couldn't have ripped his eyes from hers if the house were falling down around them. Suppose I told everyone that I had seduced you. Penelope grew very, very still. You would be ruined forever, he continued, crouching down near the edge of the sofa so that they were more on the same level. It wouldn't matter that we had never even kissed. That, my dear Penelope, is the power of the word. She looked oddly frozen, and at the same time flushed. I don't know what to say, she stammered. And then, the most bizarre thing happened. He realized that he didn't know what to say either, because he'd forgotten about rumors and the power of the word and all of that rot. The only thing he could think of was the part about the kissing. And, good God in heaven, he wanted to kiss Penelope Featherington. Penelope Featherington! He might as well have said he wanted to kiss his sister. Except he stole a glance at her. She looked uncommonly fetching. And he'd wondered how he hadn't noticed that earlier that afternoon. She wasn't his sister. She definitely wasn't his sister. Colin? His name was a mere whisper on her lips. Her eyes were quite adorably blinking and befuddled. And how was it that he'd never noticed what an intriguing shade of brown they were? Almost gold near the pupil. He'd never seen anything like it. And yet, it wasn't as if he hadn't seen her 100 times before. He stood, suddenly, drunkenly. Best if they weren't quite on the same latitude. Harder to see her eyes from up here. She stood too. Damn it. Colin? She asked, her voice barely audible. Could I ask you for a favor? Call it male intuition. Call it insanity. But a very insistent voice inside of him was screaming that whatever she wanted had to be a very bad idea. He was, however, an idiot. He had to be. because he felt his lips part, and then he heard a voice that sounded an awful like his own say, "Of course." Her lips puckered, and for a moment he thought she was trying to kiss him, but then he realized she was just bringing them together to form a word. Would, just a word. Nothing but a word beginning with W. W always looked like a kiss. Would you kiss me? Miss Girl! She's crazy for that. She's crazy for that. Um, would you kiss me? That, and I'm gooped. I'm gagged. Yeah, and Abigail, yes, as am I. They really went from my sister's Lady Whistledown to, oh my god, Penelope's eyes are actually like really pretty to like, wait, what if I ruined you, Penelope? Like, wait, to, would you kiss me? Wait, whoa, 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 whoa. Yeah, okay, we do love a direct pen. Aaron, you're so right. But let's also remember, this pen is like a spinster. She is like, oh, I'll never marry, like that sucks, but like, I'm in love with Colin. And now she's hitting him with a, would you kiss me? Would you kiss me? Come on now, girl. She is a modern woman. We just finished chapter 8, but I am possibly open to reading chapter 9 based on if people are going to stay and listen. We did just finish chapter 8 though. That was the final line. She asked, "Would you kiss me?" Um okay. I do want to chit chat for a second before I read the next one because I feel like the next one I need to be able to read well, and I feel like I need a second to rest my eyes. Um, do you think Colin will ask for the kiss in season 3? Maybe. Could be down. I could be down for Colin to ask for a little kissy pie. Um, Even if it was just like a before you marry Debling, like before you say yes to anything, like just kiss me the once. Why and why would the live end right now? Why is it asking me to tell me I don't want to end it? I'm still chit chatting with my friends. Anyway. Uh I think Colin will suggest she needs help / practice because she's a spinster. Plausible. But she's not really a spinster in the series yet, is the thing, because in the book, she's been on the marriage mark for like 10 years and she's 28 and she's like officially on the shelf. She's seen as a spinster. Her mom is like has no hope for her. In the show, she's still like 19, maybe 20. So like she's widow baby. I can see I hope she doesn't ask him for a kiss, even though like it is iconic, but like in the show, it's just like such a different dynamic. The only way I could see her like asking him for a kiss and like me being okay with it is if she was like, I don't want to embarrass myself with Debling, and then they kiss like under the guise of her like practicing for Debling, and then Colin's like, wait, why am I in love with Penelope? And he just gets all nervous. In the show, I'm hoping they're both caught up in the moment. That's so valid. I just want them to smooch. Um, she's still been on the marriage mark for a couple years in the show. Yeah, this is gonna be her 3rd season with no suitors. Um, I hope during the moonlight scene, Colin whispers "kiss me" and they're really close. That would be hot. I have seen like rumors or like theories. I would say theories more that the moonlight scene is like a dream sequence, and it's like Colin dreaming about Penn. And so, if even in his dream he's like "kiss me," then like that's gonna open some brainwaves for him. Yeah, but then it's actually just Colin dreaming. I think that would be such a good way to twist it, especially if they're going with a dream scene, which I don't know if they are, but yeah, Haley, exactly. Like Penn's been putting in the work. I want him to put in the work for Penn. Not that he's been you know, like lazy in their friendship, but he's been going at it in terms of friendship. And she's been like secretly in love with him. So I want him to put in some like longing. I want him to put in some longing hours because Penn has done her longing hours. 12 years of it in Azkaban. Like, my sister has done her time. Like, let her rest. Let Colin do the work. Um, and I think he will. Um, I think he will. Okay. Does anyone have any more thoughts on chapter 8 before we go into chapter 9? And if I stumble, it's because I am palpitating my heart. Because we know what's coming, because we know what the last line of the last chapter was. 5 episodes, Ashley. Be so for real. Colin to suffer for 5 episodes? If they're smooching in between there, I'm fine with it. Because, he needs to have like a little bit of a like a jealousy, like a professional jealousy, so like he will be suffering like a touch, but they need to be smooching before, like, they need to smooch in like episode 3 maximum. Honestly, if they were smooching 20 minutes into episode 1, I'd be fine with it. Absolutely, positively fine. Yeah, the episodes are like an hour long. We want 5 hours of him suffering. I think they will smooch by episode 3 at least, and then I am hoping carriage scene in episode 4. And I have a horrid, horrid feeling, and I've had this feeling before we even knew if the season was going to be split. I have a horrid feeling that the last episode of the first batch of episodes is going to end with getting the carriage, and then it like fades to black, and then we don't even get the carriage scene till the next month. And like, that's going to actually make me devious, and that's going to make me toilet paper Shonda Rhimes' house. Yeah, I want Debling out of there by episode 4. I want her options, like, yeah. Will you be giving more fic recs? We actually just filmed an episode of the podcast today where we have 2 fic recs. Um, we also, in our link tree, we have a Google Doc with all of the links we've ever wrecked. So if you want to look at that, if you missed some, there's also some like extra ones that we really love that we haven't talked about in episodes. So if you want to look at that, there's some amazing fics, and there's also amazing fics coming out daily. And yeah, um, but yeah, it's def going to be a carriage cliffhanger. Reagan, I hope we don't speak that into existence, but I also think that, and I'm scared. But I think they split it so Netflix can get all of its little coins. Because we know they love a coin, and we know they are ruining. Hey, sorry, Mr. Netflix, I'm going to talk shit. We know that, like, the household thing is like BS with having to like log in or be like, oh, I'm traveling. Like, why is it your business if my parents pay for my Netflix? Like, why is it your business? I'm gonna be rationing episodes for myself, but everyone is gonna post spoilers way too soon. Rationing? World War II coded. I could not. I'm going to binge them all and then watch them upon repeat. But you are so much stronger than me. I'm so sorry. I will try not to post spoilers for the first like 4 days, but you know, I'm gonna be squealing. So yeah, I'm gonna be watching them all on the same day. I'm actually gonna be watching it with some friends, which is exciting. And we have all had the discussion of be like, hey, I'm so sorry, like I'm gonna scream. Like when we see this happen, if this happens, like we want, like I'm gonna scream. And we're all in agreement. So yeah. We're gonna binge watch it for sure. We're also gonna make little like goodies. We're gonna make little cookies, little biscuits, what have you. Little Bridgerton watch party. Very exciting. Maybe we'll do a live of like making the cookies and stuff. I don't know. I haven't talked to them about it. If they want to be on live, I know Rose doesn't really do lives. We just do our audio. Super valid. Just give me a full 24 hours. That's all I ask. Love is blind, spoilers. I will try my best. I will discuss it with Rose because these are joint accounts. We have joint custody. Um, we'll mark them spoilers though, for sure. I'm going to watch before the watch party because I need to be able to rewind. Extremely valid. That is so valid. Yeah. Everyone's way of watching is valid. I'm going to binge watch because I have no self control. Um, my mom wants to watch it with me. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I was telling my parents, like when I bought the books, I bought I used my mom's Prime account. I have my own Prime account, but I used my mom's Prime account. Um, because I was in a different country, and so my Prime was for a different country. So I used my mom's Prime account to order the first book, and then I was like, "Hey, mom, I read it in 10 hours. I need to order the other 8 books. Can I use your Prime account? I'll pay you back." And then they were like, "Oh, what are the books about? What's Bridgerton?" And I was like, "Oh, like it was really good. You should watch it." And they're like, "What is it?" And I was like, "It's like Jane Austen but porn." And they're like, "Porn?" And I was like, "Yeah, well, yeah." That's how I can describe it to you. Um, because you guys, let's be for real. And I'm going to start chapter 9 in a second. I will read it tonight. Let's be for real. This is a call out post to me because now I literally run a Bridgerton podcast. When I first turned it on in like December of 2020 or whenever it dropped, when I first turned it on, I was like, "Oh, Pride and Prejudice coded. Like, I love Pride and Prejudice 2005." And then it was Anthony fucking Sienna, and I turned the TV off. Like, I was like, "Whoa, I'm here for hand flexing. I'm here for light touches. I'm here for longing stares. Like, why is this man fucking with his mutton chops?" And I literally turned the TV off, and I didn't watch it again for like over 6 months. And then I watched it, and I was like, "This is fantastic, actually. This is literature. This is media." And then season 2 came out, and I love season 2. And then I was like, "Oh, the next one is Colin and Penelope season. Let me buy Colin and Penelope's book." And here we are. Yeah. We'll scream every other word and need to pause and rewind. Yeah, that's super valid. And I had to have that conversation with the people I'm planning on watching it with, and they are aware. And we're all in the same boat. And I was like, "Hey, if it gets too much, just tell me to shut the fuck up." But yeah. Did you see Nicola in Paris today? No, I've honestly been sleeping all day because I worked a night last night. So I have not seen any new content if new content is out today. But I love that Miss Nicola is in Paris because like I think it's still like fashion season. So good for her. Um, I'm not a Paris girly. I don't live in Paris. Um, just because I don't speak French, but I love that she's living her best life. I hope she's having lots of fun. Um, yeah, okay, so I'm gonna read chapter 9. So let's recall, if you weren't on, that the last 2 sentences of chapter 8 are, or I'm going to read the last paragraph. Her lips puckered, and for a moment he thought she was trying to kiss him, but then he realized that she was just bringing them together to form a word. Would, just a word, nothing but a word beginning with W. W always looked like a kiss. Would you kiss me? That's the end of chapter 8. Chapter 9. Every week there seems to be one invitation that is coveted above all others. This week's prize must surely go to the Countess of Macclesfield, who is hosting a grand ball on Monday night. Lady Macclesfield is not a frequent hostess here in London, but she is very popular, as is her husband, and it is expected that a great many bachelors plan to attend, including Mr. Colin Bridgerton, assuming he does not collapse from exhaustion after 4 days with the 10 Bridgerton grandchildren, Viscount Berwick, and Mr. Michael in Thrushtre Weatherby. This author anticipates that a great many young and unmarried ladies will choose to attend as well, following the publication of this column. Lady Whistledown Society Papers, 16th of April, 1824. His life as he knew it was over. What? He asked, aware that he was blinking rapidly. Her face turned a deeper shade of crimson than he thought was humanly possible, and she turned away. Never mind, she mumbled. Forget I said anything. Colin thought that was a very good idea. But then, just when he thought that his world might resume its normal course, or at least that he'd be able to pretend it had, she whirled back around, her eyes alight with a passionate fire that astonished him. No, I'm not going to forget it, she cried out. I've spent my life forgetting things and not saying them, never telling anyone what I really want. Colin tried to say something, but it was clear to him that his throat had begun to close. Any minute now, he'd be dead. He was sure of it. It won't mean a thing, she said. I promise you, it won't mean anything. and I'd never expect anything from you because of it. But I could die tomorrow, and what? Her eyes looked huge and meltingly dark and pleading, and you could feel his resolve melting away. I'm 8 and 20, her voice soft and sad. I'm an old maid, and I've never been kissed. God, God, God. He knew how to speak. He was fairly certain that he'd been perfectly articulate just minutes earlier. But now he didn't seem able to form a word, and Penelope kept talking, her cheeks delightfully pink. Her lips moved so quickly that he couldn't help but wonder what they'd feel like on his skin, on his neck, on his shoulder, on his other places. I'm going to be an old maid at 9 and 20, she said, and I'll be an old maid at 30. I could die tomorrow, and you're not going to die tomorrow, he somehow managed to get out. But I could, and it would kill me because you'd already be dead, he said, thinking his voice sounded rather strange and disembodied. I don't want to die without ever having been kissed, she finally finished. Colin could think of 100 reasons why kissing Penelope Featherington was a very bad idea, and number one being that he actually wanted to kiss her. He opened his mouth, hoping that a sound would emerge that might actually be intelligible speech, but there was nothing, just the sound of breath on his lips. And then, Penelope did the one thing that could break his resolve in an instant. She looked up at him, deeply into his eyes, and uttered one simple word. Please. He was lost. There was something heartbreaking in the way she was gazing at him, as if she might die if he didn't kiss her. Not from heartbreak, not from embarrassment. It was almost as if she needed him for nourishment, to feed her soul, to fill her heart. And Colin couldn't remember anyone ever needing him with such fervor. It humbled him. It made him want her with an intensity that nearly buckled his knees. He looked at her, and somehow he didn't see the woman he'd seen so many times before. She was different. She glowed. She was a siren, a goddess, and he wondered how on earth no one had ever noticed this before. Colin? She whispered. He took a step forward, barely half a foot, but it was close enough so that when he touched her chin and tipped her face up, her lips were mere inches from his. Their breath mingled, and the air grew hot and heavy. Penelope was trembling. He could feel that under his fingers. But he wasn't so sure that he wasn't trembling too. He'd assumed he'd say something flip and droll, like the devil-may-care fellow that he was reputed to be. Anything for you, perhaps, or maybe every woman deserves at least one kiss. But as he closed the bare distance between them, he realized there were no words that could capture the intensity of the moment. No words for the passion, no words for the need, no words for the sheer epiphany of the moment. And so, on an otherwise unremarkable Friday afternoon in the heart of Mayfair, in a quiet drawing room on Mount Street, Colin Bridgerton kissed Penelope Featherington. And it was glorious. His lips touched hers softly at first, not because he was trying to be gentle, although if he had the presence of mind to think about such things, it probably would have occurred to him that this was her first kiss, and it ought to be reverent and beautiful, and all the things a girl dreams about as she's laying in bed at night. But in truth, none of that was on Colin's mind. In fact, he was thinking quite little. His kiss was soft and gentle because he was still so surprised that he was kissing her. He'd known her for years, and never even thought about touching his lips to hers, and now he couldn't have let her go if the fires of hell were licking his toes. He could barely believe what he was doing, or that he wanted to do it so damned much. It wasn't the sort of kiss one initiates because one is overcome with passion or emotion or anger or desire. It was a slower thing, a learning experience, for Colin just as much as for Penelope. And he was learning that everything he thought he'd known about kissing was rubbish. Everything else had been mere lips and tongue and softly murmured but meaningless words. This was a kiss. There was something in the friction, the way he could hear and feel her breath at the same time. Something in the way she held perfectly still, and yet he could feel her heart pounding through her skin. There was something in the fact he knew it was her. Colin moved his lips slightly to the left, until he was nipping at the corner of her mouth. softly tickling the very spot where her lips joined. His tongue dipped and traced, learning the contours of her mouth, tasting the sweet, salty essence of her. This was more than a kiss. His hands, which had been lightly splayed against her back, grew rigid, more tense as they pressed into the fabric of her dress. He could feel the heat of her under his fingertips, seeping through the muslin, swirling in the delicate muscles of her back. He drew her to him, pulling her closer, closer, until their bodies were pressed together. He could feel her, the entire length of her, and it set him on fire. He was growing hard, and he wanted her. Dear God, how he wanted her. His mouth grew more insistent, and his tongue darted forward, nudging her until her lips parted. He swallowed her soft moan of acquiescence, then pushed forward to taste her. She was sweet and a little tart from the lemonade, but she was clearly as intoxicating as a fine brandy, because Colin was starting to doubt his ability to remain on his feet. He moved his hands along the length of her, slowly, so as not to frighten her. She was soft, curvy, and lush, just as he'd always thought a woman should be. Her hips flared and her bottom was perfect, and her breasts, good God, her breasts felt good pressing against his chest. His palms itched to cup them, but he forced his hands to remain where they were, rather enjoyably, on her derriere, so it really wasn't that much of a sacrifice. Besides the fact that he really shouldn't be groping a gently bred lady's breast in the middle of their drawing room, he had a rather painful suspicion that if he touched her in that way, he would lose himself completely. Penelope, Penelope, he murmured, wondering why her name tasted so good on his lips. He was ravenous for her, heady and drugged by passion, and he wanted desperately for her to feel the same way. She felt perfect in his arms, but thus far she'd made no reaction. Oh, she had swayed in his arms and opened her mouth to welcome his sweet invasion, but other than that she had done nothing. And yet, from the pant of her breath and the beat of her heart, he knew that she was aroused. He pulled back just a few inches so that he could touch her chin and tilt her face up towards him. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing her eyes that were dazed with passion, perfectly matching her lips, which were lightly parted, completely soft, and thoroughly swollen from his kisses. She was beautiful, utterly, completely, soul-stirringly beautiful. He didn't know how he hadn't noticed it all of these years. Was the world populated with blind men, or merely stupid ones? You can kiss me too, he whispered, leaning his forehead slightly against hers. She did nothing but blink. A kiss, he murmured, lowering his lips to hers again, although just for a fleeting moment, is for two people. Her hand stirred at his back. What do I do? She whispered. Whatever you want to do. Slowly, tentatively, she lifted one of her hands to his face. Her fingers trailed lightly over his cheek, skimming along the line of his jaw until they fell away. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you? He went still. It was exactly the wrong thing to say. He didn't want to be thanked for his kiss. It made him feel guilty and shallow, as if it had been something done out of pity. And the worst part was, he knew that if all of this had come to pass only a few months earlier, it would have been out of pity. What the hell did that say about him? Don't thank me, he said gruffly, shoving himself backward until they were no longer touching. But I said don't, he repeated harshly, turning away as if he couldn't bear the sight of her, when the truth was that he couldn't quite bear himself. And the damnedest thing was, he wasn't sure why. This desperate gnawing feeling, was it guilt? Because he shouldn't have kissed her? Because he shouldn't have liked it? Colin, she said, don't be angry with yourself. I'm not, he snapped. I asked you to kiss me. I practically forced you. Now there was a surefire way to make a man feel manly. You didn't force me, he bit off. No, but for the love of God, Penelope, enough! She drew back, her eyes wide. I'm sorry, she whispered. He looked down at her hands. They were shaking. He closed his eyes in agony. Why was he being such an ass? Penelope, he began. No, it's all right, her words rushed. You don't have to say anything. No, I should. I really wish you wouldn't. Now she was looking so quietly dignified, which made him feel even worse. She was standing there, her hands clasped demurely in front of her, her eyes downward, not quite on the floor, but not his face. She thought he'd kissed her out of pity. And he was a knave because a small part of him wanted her to think that. Because if she thought it, then maybe he could convince himself that it was true, that it was just pity, that it couldn't possibly be more. I should go, he said, the words quiet and yet still too loud in a silent room. She didn't try to stop him. He motioned to the door. I should go, he said again, even as his feet refused to move. She nodded. I didn't, he started to say, then horrified by the words that nearly come out of his mouth, he actually did head towards the door. But Penelope called out. Of course she called out. You didn't what? And he didn't know what to say, because he'd started to say, I didn't kiss you out of pity. If he wanted her to know that, if he wanted her to know that, if he wanted to convince himself of that, then that could only mean that he craved her good opinion, which could only mean, I have to go, he blurted out, desperate now, as if leaving the room might be the only way to keep his thoughts from traveling down such a dangerous road. He crossed the remaining distance to the door, waiting for her to say something, to call out his name, but she didn't, and he left, and he never hated himself more. Colin was in an exceedingly bad mood before the footman showed up at his front door with a summons from his mother. Afterwards, he was beyond repair. Bloody hell. She was going to start in on him again about getting married. Her summonses were always about getting married, and he really wasn't in the mood for it right now. But she was his mother, and he loved her, and that meant he couldn't very well ignore her. So with considerable grumbling and a fair bit of cursing while he was at it, he yanked on his boots and coat and headed out the door. He was living in Bloomsbury, not the most fashionable section of town for a member of the aristocracy, although Bedford Square, where he had taken out a lease of small but elegant terrace houses, was completely an upscale and reasonable and respectable address. Colin rather liked living in Bloomsbury, where his neighbors were doctors and lawyers and scholars and people who actually did things other than attend party after party. He wasn't ready to trade in his heritage for a life in trade. It was rather good being a Bridgerton after all. But there was something stimulating about watching professional men going about their daily business, and lawyers heading east to the Inns of the Court, and doctors northwest to Portland Place. It would have been easy enough to drive his curricle across town. It had only been brought back to the Mews an hour ago upon his return from the Featheringtons, but Colin was feeling a bit in need of some fresh air, not to mention perverse enough to take the slowest means possible to number 5. If his mother intended to deliver another lecture on the virtues of marriage, followed by a lengthy dissertation on the attributes of each and every eligible miss in London, she could bloody well wait for him. Colin closed his eyes and groaned. His mood must be worse than even he had thought if he was cursing in relation to his mother, whom he, and all the Bridgertons really, held in the highest esteem and affection. It was Penelope's fault. No, it was Eloise's fault, he thought, grinding his teeth. Better to blame a sibling. No, he slumped back into his desk chair, groaning. It was his fault. If he was in a bad mood, if he was ready to yank someone's head off with his bare hands, it was his fault and his fault alone. He shouldn't have kissed Penelope. It didn't matter that he'd wanted to kiss her, even though he hadn't even realized that he wanted to kiss her until right before she'd mentioned it. He still shouldn't have kissed her. Although, when he really thought about it, he wasn't quite sure why he shouldn't have kissed her. He stood, then trudged to the window and let his forehead rest against the pane. Bedford Square was quiet, with only a few men walking along the pavement. Laborers, they looked to be, probably working on the new museum being built just to the east. It's why Colin had taken a house on the west side of the square. The construction could get very noisy. His gaze traveled north to the statue of Charles James Fox. Now, there was a man with a purpose. Led the Whigs for years. He hadn't always been very well liked in some of the older members of the ton, if some of the older members were were to be believed. But Colin was coming to think that perhaps being well liked was overrated. Heaven knew that no one was better well liked than he was, and look at him now. Frustrated and malcontent, grumpy and ready to lash out at anyone who crossed his path. He sighed, planting one hand on the window frame and pushing himself back to an upright position. He'd better get going, especially if he was planning to walk all the way to Mayfair, although, in truth, it really wasn't that far. Probably not more than 30 minutes if he kept his pace brisk, and he always did. Less if the pavements weren't littered with slow people. It was longer than most members of the ton cared to be outside in London unless they were shopping or fashionably strolling in the park, but Colin felt the need to clear his head. If the air in London wasn't particularly fresh, well, it would still have to do. His luck that day being what it was, however, by the time he reached the intersection of Oxford and Regent Street, the first splats of raindrops began to dance against his face. By the time he was turning off Hanover Square to St. George Street, it was pouring in earnest, and he was just close enough to Bruton Street that it would have been really ridiculous to have tried to hail a hackney to take him the rest of the way. So he walked on. After the first minute or so of annoyance, however, the rain began to feel oddly good. It was warm enough out that it didn't chill him to the bone, and the fat, wet sting of almost felt like a penance. He felt like maybe that was what he deserved. The door to his mother's house opened before Colin's foot had even found the top step. Wickham must have been waiting for him. "Might I suggest a towel?" the butler intoned, handing him a large white cloth. Colin took it, wondering how on earth Wickham had time to get a towel. He couldn't have known that Colin would be fool enough to walk in the rain. Not for the first time, it occurred to Colin that butlers must be possessed of strange, mystical powers. Perhaps it was a job requirement. Colin used the towel to dry his hair, causing great consternation to Wickham, who was terribly proper and surely expected Colin to retire to a private room for at least half an hour to mend his appearance. "Where's my mother?" Colin asked. Wickham's lips tightened, and he looked pointedly down at Colin's feet, which were now creating small puddles. "She's in her office," he replied, "but she's speaking with your sister." "Which sister?" Colin asked, keeping his sunny smile on his face, just to annoy Wickham, who had surely been trying to annoy him by omitting his sister's name. If you could simply say your sister to as if you could simply say your sister to a Bridgerton, and expect him to know who you were talking about. "Francesca." "Ah, yes. She's returning to Scotland soon, isn't she?" "Tomorrow." Colin handed the towel back to Wickham, who regarded it as he might a large insect. "I won't bother her then. Just let her know I'm here when she is done with Francesca." Wickham nodded. "Would you care to change your clothes, Mr. Bridgerton? I believe we have some of your brother Gregory's garments upstairs in his bedchamber." Colin found himself smiling. Gregory was finishing up his final term at Cambridge. He was 11 years younger than Colin, and it was difficult to believe that he could actually share clothing. But he supposed it was time to accept that his little brother had finally grown up. "That's an excellent idea," Colin said as he gave his sodden sleeve a rueful glance. "I'll leave these here to be cleaned and fetch them later." Wickham nodded again, murmured, "As you wish," and disappeared down the hall to parts unknown. Colin took the steps 2 at a time to the family quarters. As he sloshed down the hall, he heard the sound of a door opening. Turning around, he saw it was Eloise. Not the person he wanted to see. She immediately brought back all the memories of his afternoon with Penelope. Their conversation. The kiss. Especially the kiss. And even worse, the guilt he'd felt afterward. The guilt he still felt. "Colin!" Eloise said brightly. "I didn't realize you— What did you do? Walk?" He shrugged. I like the rain. She eyed him curiously, her head cocking to the side as it always did when she was puzzling through something. You're in a rather odd mood today. I'm soaking wet, Eloise. No need to snap at me about it, she said with a sniff. I didn't force you to walk across town in the rain. It wasn't raining when I left, he felt rather compelled to say. There was something about his sibling that brought out the 8-year-old boy in a body. I'm sure the sky was gray, she returned. Clearly, she had a bit of 8-year-old in her as well. May we continue this discussion when I am dry? He asked, his voice deliberately impatient. Of course, she said expansively, all accommodation. I'll wait for you right here. Colin took his time while he changed into Gregory's clothes, taking more care with his cravat than he had in years. Finally, when he was convinced that Eloise must be grinding her teeth, he re-entered the hall. I heard you went to see Penelope today, she said without preamble. Wrong thing to say. Where did you hear that? He asked carefully. He knew that his sister and Penelope were close, but surely Penelope wouldn't have told Eloise about that. Felicity told Hyacinth. And Hyacinth told you? Of course. Something, Colin muttered, has got to be done about all the gossip in this town. I hardly think this counts as gossip, Colin, Eloise said. It's not as if you're interested in Penelope. If she had been talking about any other woman, Colin would have expected her to give him a sidelong glance, followed by a coy, Are you? But this was Penelope, and even though Eloise was her very best friend, and thus her finest champion, even she couldn't imagine that a man of Colin's reputation and popularity would be interested in a woman of Penelope's reputation and lack of popularity. Colin's mood shifted from bad to foul. Anyway, Eloise continued, completely oblivious to the thunderstorm that was brewing in her normally sunny, jovial brother. Felicity told Hyacinth that Brierly told her that you'd visited, and I was just wondering what it was about. It's none of your business, Colin said briskly, hoping that she'd leave it at that, but not really believing she would. He took a step towards the stairwell, though, always optimistic. It's about my birthday, isn't it? Eloise guessed, dashing in front of him with such a suddenness that his toe crashed into her slipper. She winced, but Colin didn't feel particularly sympathetic. No, it's not about your birthday, he snapped. Your birthday isn't even until... hell. He stopped. Hell. Until next week, he grumbled. She smiled slightly, then, as if her brain had just realized it had taken a wrong turn, her lips parted with dismay as she continued, as she mentally backed up and headed in another direction. So, she continued, moving slightly so that she better blocked his path, if you didn't go over there to discuss my birthday, and there's nothing you could say now that would convince me you did, why did you go see Penelope? Is nothing private in this world? Not in this family. Colin decided that his best bet was to adopt his usual sunny persona, even though he didn't feel the least bit charitable towards her at the moment. So he slapped on the smoothest and easiest of his smiles, quirked his head to the side, and asked, Do I hear Mother calling my name? I didn't hear a thing, Eloise said pertly. But what is wrong with you? You look very odd. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're not fine. You look as if you've been to the dentist. His voice descended into a mutter. It's always nice to receive compliments from family. If you can't trust your family to be honest with you, she volleyed, who can you trust? He leaned fluidly back against the wall, crossing his arms. I prefer flattery to honesty. No, you don't. Dear God, he wanted to smack her. He hadn't done that since he was 12, and he'd been horsewhipped for it, the only time he could recall his father laying a hand on him. What I want, Colin returned, arching one brow, is an immediate cessation of this conversation. What I want, Eloise needled, is for me to... What you want, Eloise needled, is for me to stop asking you why you went to see Penelope Featherington. But I think we both know that isn't likely to occur. And that was when he knew it. He knew it deep in his bones, from his head to his toes, his heart to his mind that his sister was Lady Whistledown. All of the pieces fit. There was no one more stubborn and bull-headed, no one who could, or would, take the time to get to the bottom of every last piece of gossip and innuendo. When Eloise wanted something, she didn't stop until she had it firmly in her grasp. It wasn't about money or greed or material goods. With her, it was about knowledge. She liked knowing things, and she'd needle and needle and needle until you told her exactly what she wanted to hear. It was a miracle no one had found her out sooner. Out of nowhere, he said, "I need to talk to you." He grabbed her arm and hauled her into the nearest room, which happened to be her own. "Colin!" she shrieked, trying unsuccessfully to shake him off. "What are you doing?" He slammed the door shut, let go of her, and crossed his arms, his stance wide, his expression menacing. "Colin?" she repeated, her voice dubious. "I know what you've been up to." "What I've been—" And then, damn her, she started laughing. "Eloise!" he boomed. "I'm talking to you." "Clearly," she just barely managed to get out. He held his ground, glaring at her. She was looking away, nearly doubled over with laughter. Finally, she said, "What are you—" But then she looked at him again, and even though she tried to keep her mouth shut, she exploded again. If she'd been drinking something, Colin thought, without a trace of humor, it would have come out her nose. "What the hell is the matter with you?" he snapped. That finally got her attention. He didn't know whether it was his tone of voice or maybe his use of profanity, but she sobered in an instant. "My word," she said softly. "You're serious. Do I look like I'm joking?" "No," Eloise said, "although you did at first. I'm sorry, Colin, but it's just not like you to be glowering and yelling and all that. You looked rather like Antony. You— Actually," she said, giving him a look that was not nearly as wary as it should have been, "you looked more like yourself trying to intimidate Antony. Or trying to imitate Antony. He was going to kill her. Right here in her room. In his mother's house, he was going to commit sororicide." "Colin?" she asked hesitantly, as if she'd just finally noticed he was long since past angry and on his way to furious. "Sit down." He jerked his head towards a chair. "Now." "Oh, are you all right? Are you all right? Sit down!" he roared. And she did, with alacrity. I don't know that word. "I can't remember the last time you raised your voice," she whispered. I can't remember the last time I had cause to." "What's wrong?" He decided he might as well come out and say it. "Colin, I know you're Lady Whistledown." "What?" "There's no use denying it. I've seen—" Eloise jumped to her feet. "Except that it's not true." Suddenly, he no longer felt quite so angry. Instead, he felt tired. Old. "Eloise, I've seen the proof." "What proof?" she asked, her voice rising in disbelief. "How can there be proof of something that isn't true?" He grabbed one of her hands. "Look at your fingers." She did so. "What about them?" "Ink stains." Her mouth fell open. "From that you've deduced that I'm Lady Whistledown?" "Why are they there, then?" "You've never used a quill?" "Eloise." There was a great deal of warning in his voice. "I don't have to tell you why I have ink stains on my fingers." He said her name again. "I don't," she protested. "Oh, you know—" "Oh, very well, fine." She crossed her arms mutinously. "I write letters." He shot her an extremely disbelieving look. "I do," she protested. "Every day, sometimes two in a day, when Francesca is away. I'm a loyal correspondent. You should know I've written enough letters with your name on the envelope, although I doubt half of them ever reached you." "Letters?" he asked, his voice full of doubt and derision. "For God's sake, Eloise, do you really think that will wash? Who the devil are you writing so many letters to?" She blushed. Really, truly, deeply blushed. "It's none of your business." He would have been intrigued by her reaction if he still weren't so sure that she was lying about being Lady Whistledown. "For God's sakes, Eloise," he bit off. Who is going to believe you? Or who is going to believe that you're writing letters every day? I certainly don't. She glared at him, her dark gray eyes flashing with fury. I don't care what you think, she said in a very low voice. No, that's not true. I am furious that you don't believe me. You're not giving me much to believe in, he said warily. She stood, walked over to him, poked him in the chest, hard. You are my brother, she spat out. You should believe me unquestioningly, love me unconditionally. That's what it means to be family. Eloise, he said, her name coming out really as nothing more than a sigh. Don't try to make excuses now. I wasn't. That's even worse. She stalked to the door. You should be on your hands and knees, begging me for forgiveness. He hadn't thought he had it in him to smile, but somehow he did. That did it for him. Now that doesn't really seem. Now that doesn't really seem in keeping with my character, does it? She opened her mouth to say something, but the sound that came out was not precisely English. All she managed was the. All she managed was something along the lines of "Ugh!" in an extremely irate voice, and then stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Colin slouched into the chair, wondering when she'd realize that she left him in her own bedroom. The irony was, he reflected, possibly the only bright spot in an otherwise miserable day. End of chapter 9. Wow! A lot going on. A lot going on. They smooched! You guys, they kissed. I'm scrolling back. You guys, not to toot my own horn, but I did kind of good on the kiss scene. Like, I didn't fumble that much. Like, that was kind of impressive. Um, my favorite. Yeah, the fact that she says thank you is so absolutely wild. He was pressed as fuck when she said thank you. What are we talking about, girls? Yeah, but they smooched and then Colin had a mental breakdown immediately after, which I think is so funny and so valid. Ooh, do you think that if Colin in the show accuses Eloise, it would add to her being angry at Penn? I think that's a really good question. Um, I think it depends where Eloise and Penn are in their relationship. Um, like if Eloise is still mad that Penn's writing and like doesn't really know why she's continuing to write, is just mad at her, then like yeah, maybe it would. If it's been like, oh, here are my reasons for continuing to write. If there's like a subplot where she's giving money to her family, like maybe Eloise would be more like, it's not me, it's not me. I know who it is, but I can't tell you, but it's not me. Um, I think it could be really interesting. I kind of hope he does accuse Eloise, and we've seen there was like a few little like to the side things in the show, like Eloise tucking the pamphlet of her like feminist icon thing into her book, and Colin seeing like that is going to be preliminary in her thinking, yeah, it was them. What piece of furniture do you think Nicola and Luke broke? My heart. No, I'm kidding. We know it wasn't a chair. Nicola said it wasn't a chair, so I think it has to be a settee. I think that is safe to say. Aaron, I think you're right. Um, I'm just like, what else could they be like? One. So I think it's probably like a little couch or an ottoman moment. I don't know why, but it feels like it was a footboard at the end of the bed. If they literally tore a footboard off the bed, like I would like to see it personally, and I would like to see it. And what about you, Mr. Bridgerton? And I would like to see it. Um, yeah, but you guys, I would kill for just a little fistful of peanut M&Ms, but I don't want to get up and get them. But yeah, Who do you want the next season to be? I think I think it would make sense if the next season was Benedict because I think they're going to need to do a time jump. And let me explain. Because I'm also ready for Eloise. I'd be happy with whoever season next as long as it's not the children. Um, I think it's gonna be Benedict because Benedict's story starts with them meeting at a ball at Violet Bridgerton's birthday party. He meets Sophie, which I think is possible to just like see in the background of this season or even just at the beginning of next season, and then he doesn't see her for 2 years. Um, he's looking for her for 2 years. It's a Cinderella story, right? So in that 2 years, it gives time to the other stories as well to start like growing. Because if we think of Francesca's story, she's first married to John, and then John unfortunately passes away, and then she has a few years before she, uh, you know, reconnects with her love interest, which is Michael. So it's like she needs that 2 years at least to um, be sad and to grieve. And then with Eloise's story, Philip's children are so essential to the plot. And right now we know Philip's children are like 1 or 2. So they need that 2 to 3 to 4 years even to grow old enough. And we know the Bridgerton timeline's like a little funky monkey. Um, uh, they need that time to grow up so that her plot is plausible because they're so essential to the plot and they're like little um interactions and like I think her prank war with the kids is funny. Like I think it's funny. But to be able to do that, they need to be older. She can't be beefing with a 3 year old. It'd be weird. So I think Benedict's because it gives plausibility to the time jump and it helps the other stories grow too. So I think Benedict's needs to be next. But I think like the reason I would say that it might not be Benedict is because they need like a single hot Bridgerton brother, and Gregory is like 4.5 years old. So I've not read Gregory's book, so in my mind it's literally just like a child. Um I could honestly see them maybe having Eloise be a spinster. I think she's gonna not run off right before Penn and Colin's wedding like she does in canon. I think she's gonna, have to deal with kind of being alone or not having Penn like she's used to, which she's gonna have to deal with anyway this season because they're in a fight. But it's gonna make her like deal with her spinsterhood more or her perceived hope for spinsterhood, or she like thinks she wants to be a spinster. I think they're gonna make her wait a few years and be like, maybe I don't want to be alone. Um, do you think Violet will get any love action garden tending? That's a really good question. We actually I think talked about it in the podcast today. It's not posted yet, but it will be probably later this week. I honestly don't know who's editing this one. I might have to text Rose. But she didn't send me the she didn't send me the recording, so I assume it's not me. Um, but I think this season will open the possibility of Violet just like starting to speak to men again or possibly having a dance or two. I don't think we will see her garden getting tended this season. Um, I've said it before, I think it would be more impactful to her storyline and to Francesca's storyline if she were to, take the steps to start moving on a little bit. Not moving on, but like having someone else be a companion with her or like whatever. Or like potentially looking for love again. I think if she really stepped into that during Francesca's season, it would be really impactful. So like I think we'll see some like whispers of it this season, but I don't think it's gonna be like, oh, she's got a boyfriend suddenly. Um I think Ben is gonna be Eloise's catalyst to want to find love because their relationship is stronger. Haley, I think that's so valid. I think the Penn and Colin thing will definitely feed into it. But I think once Ben is also married and doesn't have time for Eloise and doesn't have time for their chit chats on the swings, like I think that's when she's like, I'm sending one more note to Philip and I'm getting in a hack. Like, I'm gonna go talk to this guy. Would you want a Violet side series similar to Queen Charlotte, like her story with Edmund? I would. I mean, I'd watch it. I haven't read the um Happily Ever After, where I think it like touches on their story, or I haven't read the Rokesby series. So I'm kind of not super clear on their relationship. Like, I know that they knew each other and then she was a wallflower. Like, I would love to see it. Play it out. Put it on. Play the show. Who's your favorite couple? Pollen. I run a Pollen podcast, baby, between the scandal sheets. I love Pollen. Um, yeah. But yeah. Um, I like Cantony too. I will read an occasional Cantony fic because they're good. I like Philoise too. I like them all. Um, I think each book is a touch problematic in some way, so I'm okay with the show changing some things, aka Benedict's attitude, aka you know some other things. Uh, rank the couples. Ooh. Okay, so I've not read Gregory's book yet, so I have to leave that out, right? Because I can't say. I love everything I know about Gregory's book. I love that he's like a little crazy cat and like climbing in a tree and what have you. I think just who's my least favorite? I honestly think that Simon and Daphne and Benedict and Sophie, just based on the book Benedict and Benedict's attitude, are fighting for last place. Because one, Daphne's like a little bit of like a assaulter, but we don't talk about that. But I don't love the things she did in the early days of their marriage, and I don't love the lack of communication. And then Benedict is problematic in his book, but did I rate it 5 stars originally on my Goodreads? Yeah, I did. Um, and I'm sorry to say that, and don't cancel me, please. Um, I I love A Cinderella Story. That's why I rated it 5 stars. Um, what is the song you absolutely need to have in season 3? Unholy by Sam Smith. Mama don't know daddy's getting hot. That the quartet version or the string version, so good. That's horny. Play it in the carriage. I want to see it. I'd like to see it, please. And it's like it can kind of fit with the carriage scene. It's because like don't know daddy's getting hot. Like doesn't know Pen's doing her own like little saucy thing, being Lady Whistledown. But it's like pull your shirt off. Like let's see it. I would like that song. Um, and if we get to Gregory's season, I think if Speak Now is not based on the things I know about Gregory, I think if Speak Now is not on his album, then someone needs to get sued. Oh, Dressed by Taylor Swift, that is extraordinarily valid. I know some girlies are like back on the Taylor Swift, sick of her train and like, okay, that's fine. I love Miss Tay Swift. Oh, you know what? Speaking of Taylor Swift, Right Where You Left Me, it won't make it on, but I think that's like such a Pollen song. And I love it. Do you like Book Philip? Didn't love him. I think he's not the worst. I think he is perfectly mid tier in terms of like love interest in terms of men in these books because like let's like everyone is problematic. Everyone is problematic. Everyone is problematic. They are problematic, but I love it and it's okay. I don't love it, but I still love the books even like in lieu of the problematics. But Tony Anthony like was fully just like I'm not going to love my wife and that's a promise. And then Benedict was like, I can't recognize a face if you paid me, but I'm going to beg, plead, and force and, like, you know, blackmail this girl into being my mistress and then deflower her and then still be mad at her and then, whatever. That's a problem. And then Simon's like, hey, I'm not going to tell anyone, or like, I'm not going to explain this kid thing. I'm just going to not impregnate my wife. And then like, I can't get into the Daphne of it all on that. And then you have Philip, who's just like trauma king, filled with daddy trauma, as literally every person in this series is. There's not one alive father Like, not, is there, and correct me if I'm wrong, is there a single surviving father for the Bridgerton grandchildren to have a grandfather? Like, I do not think there's one. I noticed people who love Book Benedict dislike Colin and the other way around. Mm. That's interesting. I think a problem a lot of people have with like Book Benedict and then show Benedict is that because Colin's supposed to be like the cheeky charmer, when Benedict shows those characteristics in the show that he like doesn't have in the book, people are like, they stole Colin's personality. Which, like, well, you can't just like make him be like a dick the whole time. Like, yeah. Do you think King George or Marina will die this season? I think King George is out of there. Could do. I think King George dying will have like a impact on how Queen Charlotte feels about things, and I think if like she's gonna be visibly devastated. Um, and would it cause her to double down on her like search for Whistledown, or would it cause her to just be like, well, nothing matters because the love of my life is dead? Um, all I know is that Marina's died in the book because she was just like a throwaway character in the book. And I think the only way to make Eloise's and Philip's season work is if she passes away, because I don't think her kids are just going to be left with Philip without her being passed. Um, because I think it would be a weird thing to do, and it would kind of villainize her if she just left. Because like her whole thing and her whole like saving grace for her character, in my opinion, was like everything I did for my children. Like, okay, Portia Featherington coded, but I don't think Marina will kill herself. I think if they want to go with like the, because spoiler alert, in the book Marina tries to drown herself in the lake. I think, and then she like gets ill from it. Um yeah, so she gets ill and gets like pneumonia and passes away. I think a more fitting to show Marina character way to do that is if maybe one of the children falls in the lake, if she were somehow like doing something to help or aid her children. Like, I think it would be a good way to write her off, just knowing that she unfortunately does have to, in my opinion, for the character, it only makes sense for her to pass for the story to go how it's supposed to go. But if they figure out a way to write around it, that's why they pay writers, and that's why I'm not in the writing room. Um, but yeah, that's my thought process on that. Yeah, but I mean, yeah. Do you think that Marina and Penn will have resolution between them? I don't think they're inviting the actress who. Hi, Brianna. I don't think they're inviting the actress who played Marina back to the show. Um, Nor do I think she has any further storylines. So I think if there's any resolution between them, it's going to be in a written letter, or it's just going to be Marina being like, I am so unworried about what's happening in London. I have my kids and I have whatever. Um, you know, if people want to hate Penn, people want to hate Penn. People want to hate Marina, people want to hate Marina. Like, some people just want to choose a character to hate and a character to love, and I think it kind of negates a lot of character growth and a lot of um, nuance to the characters to do that. But that's their prerogative. If you want to do that, you can. Um, I disagree with a good portion of Marina's actions. I disagree with some of Penn's actions too. But like, I don't. I don't personally need to see resolution. The resolution I need to see in the Marina aspect is Colin just being like, I never loved her. Like, I was never actually in love. But that's my personal opinion. Um, what's another song I hope to hear in season three? Of course, Unholy. I said it before. Um, what's like a deep cut? Can I just scroll through my Spotify for a second? Let's see. I kind of want drama. I kind of want intrigue. Like, what's a good like heartbreaking song? Oh, do you know what like won't be on there because I feel like it just won't be. But like, I would. Oh, Homesick by Noah Kahn. I did finish reading. I'm finished reading for the night. Sorry, Sunkissed. Um, but simply for the line. Oh, sorry. I don't know if that ruined my. Can you guys still hear me? Oh, Hosier. Yeah, I agree with you, Haley. Um, can you hear me, Brianna? Can you hear me? Lady Whistledown Loki looks like Julie Andrews. Brianna, are you on the IMDb? Because I know you didn't watch this show, babe. Um, yeah, but Homesick by Noah Kahn. Okay, you're a star, Brianna. Thank you. Um, I would love for that to be on there just because of like the first few lines. Uh, 2 months since you got back. How have you been? Are you bored yet? Like, ooh, Traveler Colin. That's a kick in the butt. Um, and then it's just like if we are looking at it from Penn's perspective, it's talking about like kind of being stuck in your hometown and um feeling like you can't escape like the house that you grew up in, and I'm like that's extremely valid for Penelope. Ooh, what is on me? Oh, I think it's candle particles. What's your favorite R&B scene that you hope to see in the show? The carriage scene. No, but also the hand cutting, which I know we're gonna get, so I'm excited. I have a whole playlist with songs I want for the season. Hey, tag me in it. I would be more than happy to listen to that playlist. I love pollen coated. Strike from Hosier. The first part is so pollen. Ooh, I'll have to listen to that. Work song by Hosier, of course. Rain dance scene, come home. Yeah. So there's like there hi Sarah. There are scenes in the book that are like alluded to or that they almost do that don't actually happen that I am like, well, just make it happen. Like make it happen in the show. And one of those is Berkeley Square, Dance in the Rain. Oh, Flowers by Miley Cyrus. Rana, you're so right. You're so real for that. That is such a good one. Um, I would also take Angel Like You by Miley Cyrus. I love Miley Cyrus. Um, I would take that for like Penn, after Lady Whistledown fight, I think that'd be good. What was I talking about a second ago? Oh yeah, I want them to dance in the rain in Berkeley Square. I want them to make out in the rain. Like I don't know. That's fine by me. They kind of already did that with Simon and Daphne though. Like they had a rain scene, but I'm like, and do it again. And Cantony kind of had a rain scene in the gazebo, but and do it again. Everyone loves a rain scene. Pride and Prejudice had a rain scene. Pride and Prejudice had a few rain scenes. Wait, Brianna, because that's actually funny, because that'd be a good one. Best of Both Worlds by Hannah Montana or the Gossip Girl theme song. Um, both extremely valid choices for Little Miss Lady Whistledown. Do you see? My friend got me this Lady Whistledown hoodie. Yeah, those are both extremely valid choices. But yeah, I'm kind of just interested. Well, because like I feel like we know a lot about this season. Let the rain fall down. Yeah, Hilary Duff, love her. But I think we're all excited for the season. We're hoping to see like certain aspects of the book, but like there's so much new stuff that I'm like, well, what are they going to be able to fit in, and what are they going to change? So it's like, do you think Colin will stop Debling from proposing to Penn at the last minute, i.e., episode 5? I want Debling out of there by episode 4, and I said it before, and I'll say it again. I hope we don't get far enough for that, and I really don't want Colin to be the catalyst for him denying a proposal. I think if it was like Colin thinks he's going to ruin the proposal, he thinks he's going to step in and like I object and like what have you, but Penn already like turned him down or already said that she wouldn't be able to marry him. I want it to be Penelope's decision fully. Um, I want there to be a lot of good reasons for her to choose Debling, and like I don't want him to be like a dickhead or whatever. Buy a Debling, yeah. I want her to have a million. You're giving me a million reasons. Literally, put Lady Gaga on the track. Um, I want there to be a million reasons for her to choose Devling because he's a good guy, or like he is offering her what she wants or what have you, but then she still just chooses Colin, or at least just like chooses not having a life without Colin, even if like promises haven't been made between them, even if their feelings haven't been talked about. Brianna, you are like doxing me right now. This is my friend. I want to see Colin be feral. I want to see him be absolutely bonkers off his rocker. Like I want to see him be feral. Um, just in like not even like to Penn directly, but just like about Penn when he's talking about her with other people. But yeah, what does doxing mean? It means you are exposing aspects of my identity. Doxing is really when you like post someone's address, but don't tell people I met Lady Gaga. No, I'm kidding. That was literally ew. That was like 9 years ago. Do you realize that? That's crazy. I don't think I still have her number. I'm kidding. I never had Lady Gaga's number. If I did, I would put it on a t-shirt. Yeah. But yeah. Any closing thoughts? I mean, we have Colin being deranged already in so many ways. He's accused Eloise of being Lady Whistledown. He's kissed Penelope. He is spiraling about that. I also hope when Colin realizes his feelings for Penn, he goes and tells her and finds out she's Lady Whistledown because drama. Yeah, well, like um, in the book, spoilers, when he like sees Penn get into the hired hack, he's like, "Wait, is Penn coming to see me?" And he's like fine with her being in the hired hack until they pass his house, and then he's like, "Wait, who is she going to see?" And then he thinks she's going to see a lover, and if he has like accepted his feelings for her at that point, like that's gonna like mess with his little noggin. Do you think we'll get the official poster? When do you think we'll get the official poster? Your guess is as good as mine. They just drop stuff so randomly sometimes in this fandom. um I honestly think we might get like an official trailer before we get, or at the same time that we get a poster, so I'm not holding my breath, but I think by April. I think Pollen Week is going to be lucrative for us. And Pollen Week is the week of April 8th, 6th, 8th, 10th, because that is when Pollen meets and Penelope's birthday and what have you. Okay. I think that may be all for me tonight, girl gang. Let me look at my work schedule. Hold on. Or gang. I don't know who's watching. Brianna, why don't you just FaceTime me directly in like 5 minutes? When will the next episode be up of the podcast? We recorded the next episode today, so it should be up in the next couple of days, probably by Friday. The next episode. I will answer the phone now because I'm obviously awake, but let me close this first. The next episode will probably be up by Friday. If I'm editing it, it will probably be up by, yeah, later in the week. If Rose is editing, she's quicker than I am. But yeah, we recorded today, so. Sorry, I'm checking my work schedule. That's not right. That's not the current one. I will be able to do another live on Thursday. So on Thursday, we'll read chapter 10 and chapter 11. Thank you, Rona. I just got them done. They're like Barbie pink. Yeah, but the next live will be on Thursday, and the next episode of the podcast will be up by Friday. But you can listen to the podcast wherever the podcast is available. Links are in bio. You can check it out there. If you want to possibly be included in an upcoming podcast, this last podcast we went through the voicemails left by our lovely fans. You can leave one of those. And the link is in the bio to our SpeakPipe where you can leave a little voicemail. And if you don't feel comfortable leaving a voicemail, send us an email, send us a DM. We are chronically online, so you can find us anywhere. But it's been so real. I am going to bed. But I will see you guys Thursday and keep an eye out for the podcast coming out this week. All right. Bye.